today we have another interesting guest at the podcast. It's a person who has an interesting integration story in Finland that I'm very curious to hear more about, and that I also think will be a very good story for anyone from anywhere in the world who's coming to Finland, who wants to understand how to integrate in Finland. She is none other than Alexandra Shtromberg. Welcome to the podcast, Alexandra.
Oh, thank you.
So let me go back to your roots. So where do you come from and why did you come to Finland and when was that?
Yeah, I'm from Russian Karelia, from Petroskoy, and the first time I came to Finland 12 years ago as an exchange student, setting my roots in Finnish Karelia in Joensuu then. I just turned 18, so that was also my first look into Finnish pub crawl culture, because they actually check their IDs there, at least in Joensuu they did. But then I felt that Joensuu is quite a small place for me, especially we just had one bar we were visiting every weekend, being a jet set bar. I have no idea if it still exists, but whatever. That's how I ended up applying for the International Business Law Master's degree program in the University of Helsinki and coming to Helsinki 10 years ago. It's going to be my 10-year anniversary this July.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll congratulate you later also. So 10 years in Helsinki, and how was the first years? Helsinki is quite multicultural today, but how was it 10 years ago and what were, let's say, the struggles as an international student that you faced?
Very good questions indeed. I think Helsinki has been very international and very welcoming back then. We didn't have yet International House Helsinki then, and I feel that's a very big step forward. And there was also no alternatives or nothing like Hello Espoo program that Espoo has at the moment. So there was lots of things going back and forward, figuring out dependencies, whether you need to first register a permanent address or go and apply for a travel card, how to do that. Of course, we had our buddies from the university, so tutors assigned to us, and they were actually doing a lot of work that instead I think municipalities can do and are doing more and more now as we have these amazing examples of International House Helsinki and Hello Espoo.
So how have you seen that develop then over the years? So I've been in Finland living full time about 13 years, 14 years more or less. And how have you seen the development of the integration issue? Because before we didn't really talk about it, as far as I remember. It was very natural for internationals to come here and focus on maybe learning the language, which you did very well. So we can talk more about also your language learning processes, because you're speaking both Finnish and Swedish and promote integration in both languages at the same time, which is for many internationals maybe very difficult to understand how to do. So I want to go into that also, and maybe you can take us back to when you actually started taking the language learning seriously. And by the way, did you speak good English already then?
Yeah, and Finnish as well, but we can come back to that
Okay,
later
that's
as well.
interesting.
So that's like a complex puzzle, I would say.
Okay, interesting. But tell me how you've seen this develop then. So how was it for you 10 years ago? And then how have you seen this develop? And maybe you can expand on your personal starting point. Maybe you had an advantage then with the Finnish.
Yeah. I think what has been a major breakthrough has been this service-minded approach. So nowadays, the idea of integration path in the municipalities taken in a bit more holistic way, rather than seeing this as separate pieces that need to be somehow stuck together, like travel card, library card, information about health, and so on. I feel, and what is very good thing at the moment, there is this idea to put it all together and bundle the services together, and also utilize different communication platforms, so websites, social media, for example, Facebook page for Hello Espoo, in a way that information is served in a very clear way. Because essentially the problem is not to go and get the travel card at some point, but the problem is to find clear information presented in a very clear way. Hey, I'm coming to this city in 1 week or month. What I need to do and what I need to do first to avoid any overlaps, to avoid any rework of my documents that might cause unneeded stress. So I would say that this information put in a very user-friendly way is very important. And for example, support for pop-in points where you can just come and talk to people and ask questions and you receive answers on a timely basis in multiple languages has helped a lot. Because before it was a bit landing too much on the shoulders of the university, of the tutors, other representatives of the programs.
I wanted to ask about the university's role here. So, what was the struggles from the university's perspective, if you can recall something, and what was very helpful to have the university as your base? Because of course you have the university as a formal institution, but then also the other students and maybe some other international students with similar experiences that can also help somehow.
I think the main struggle goes in this, let's say, legal details. Whether you're a student coming from the European Union or outside the European Union, what's your permit in Finland is based on, these are all details that the university representatives might not know, but that might affect the sequence of things you need to do in order to settle in Helsinki or another Finnish municipality. So of course there is certain things on the checklist you can easily cross out, but for that you would need more professional help, let's say. But I really don't recall there have been any challenges, or at least also maybe I was, let's say, a very simple case. I was a student just coming alone, no family members, no pets to take care of, or no car to register. But of course, all these onboarding paths should serve different scenarios because people have very different life situations and it's important to get sufficient information for all these life cases and life scenarios.
And what about the language? So you spoke English and Finnish.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that? So what was your language level when you started studying at the Helsinki University? And what language did you study in?
Yeah, I joined the program in English because I also wanted to do a very international degree. And actually, after graduating from the University of Helsinki, I completed another degree, which was both in Finnish and in English at Aalto University. But the first one was full in English. And I also earlier studied translation and interpreting in the context of legal English. So I didn't have this challenge to absorb big chunks of information and legal texts in English. I have also studied Finnish earlier when I was back in Petroskoi in Karelia, also because it's so similar to Karelian language that I don't really know, but I could hear a lot when being back at my hometown. So it was kind of familiar. But Finnish language is so difficult that you cannot really practice it and you cannot really strengthen your skills unless you're absorbed into language environment, have a deep dive into the language every day. And that, I think, makes the Finnish language very different even from German or English, where you might have a bit of break and then just easily put it all back in your head.
So how was your immersion in Finnish then? So how did you find the environment to practice properly and then how did you then become fluent basically in Finnish? So if you take us back to your Finnish language learning journey.
Yeah, I really like the concept of the language cafes, which idea is that you don't have a set structure to practice language and you just can come, get a cup of coffee, meet other like-minded people and just talk, because that puts away the pressure of, oh, I need to be 100% correct about Finnish grammar. Where is my partitive? Oh no, I'm missing one syllable in the end of this word. And back then we didn't have any GenAI to fix all our mistakes. So it was like completely different case. With the language cafes, that was a very good idea. You just sit down or you walk and you talk. And then even if you make any mistakes, you can agree with other people, whether you feel more comfortable than that they correct you or just let it go in a way. Because when it comes to grammar, I feel that spoken Finnish is such that you even don't need to be fully grammatically correct, that people understand you, follow your instructions. So you need to let your inner perfectionist completely go off when you learn and speak Finnish.
Definitely, yeah. I've been experiencing that myself, being very perfectionistic in my younger days, but trying to be more practical these days. In all languages and in general in life, I think we are schooled to be thinking about perfect test results and perfect performance rather than just communicate, for example. So at what point did you then start learning Swedish as a language, and why did you start learning Swedish also?
I learned German when I was back at school. I wouldn't say that my German was very good. It was still some kind of compulsory coursework I had to do. But because I learned German, I was thinking that learning Swedish could be an easy nut to crack. And then when I first came to Helsinki, I felt like, wow, everything comes in two languages, all these road signs and so on, because you don't see that in Joensuu, obviously. So I just talked to my friends, my former flatmate, back from the student apartment times, and we just went to Lukan's language cafe. And then there, by that time, I was just taking some self-study Swedish language classes on my own. So kind of a book that you take and it says, learn Swedish in 3 months. Then I was feeling like, it's difficult. Still, it's difficult to try talking in this language after very long and intensive study days. So then I put this idea of learning Swedish on hold. But then when COVID hit and we were all locked home, I was thinking like, now I'm going to take my Restart textbook. I cannot postpone or procrastinate anymore. So I just went through all the Restart textbooks on my own and took a couple of grammar refresh classes with an amazing teacher from Arbis.
Fantastic. And now you're also using Swedish politically as a language, a working language. And we'll come back to that also, but I want to hear a little bit also about your study journey. So what did you study, and then what did you graduate from, and then how was your early days starting your career, and then how has your career been maybe before or in parallel with your political interests that I want to come to just in a second. But first, from studies to your career, if you tell us that story, please.
Lots of things to recall. I don't think I have like super good memory because sometimes just put it like back in my memory box. But well, I have already mentioned that I studied international business law at the University of Helsinki. It was a 2 years master's degree program that actually I don't think the University of Helsinki has anymore for some reasons. But back then we had a very good combination of classwork on international arbitration, international contracts, consumer rights, also strengthened by classes in legal writing, and we also did pro bono legal help for refugees and for young startup entrepreneurs. So some of them were just in their teen years, and I could still see that they're kind of working on their entrepreneurship journey 8 years later. It was a very good experience. And by time when I was graduating, I felt that I want to do some studies that would have a bit more touch with the business world, because my program was a very classical law school program. Lots of exams, legal writing, but no much business case or group work. So that's how I ended in the Aalto University, studying yritysjuridiikka, being actually the master's degree program in Finnish.
So like business law.
Yes, exactly. So I had to rush and do my ykitesti, so the upper and the intermediate language test in Finnish, because you really need to score B2 level, so upper intermediate in writing to get admitted. And then in practice, I quite often ended up in classes where you write something in English, but you have to present the same thing in Finnish. And that was a bit overwhelming, but still a very nice experience.
So what's your official working title right now? You're working with tax law, or what's your official title?
Oh, we just had
So your profession, so is it something like a Finnish lawyer, a Finnish tax lawyer already, or what's the official?
That's a very good thing to describe. So I work as a tax and legal technology consultant in a Big Four firm, meaning that I need to put together the puzzle of technology, generative AI, together with some high-level knowledge of tax regulatory framework. And we advise the clients on questions related to electronic invoicing, preparedness for VAT in the digital age, and many other topics that are quite tricky both for lawyers and tax professionals.
Yeah, it sounds very complicated. So I'm very curious to understand
Definitely.
properly. So because AI wasn't really a big thing 5 years ago. So when exactly did you graduate, and when did you start working with what you're doing now, and what did you do before you worked more with AI? Because it's it's very recent, at least from my perspective. So what was the first, let's say, technology you worked with, or was it AI from the beginning?
Well, that brings us to a very good question. What is AI? What is not AI? And I would say that's even a bit more existential, philosophical question. But to put it in a bit simpler words, I have completed my second master's in Aalto. Was it December 2019? And by that time, I have already started my at my current workplace at the Big Four company. And then I work lots with data quality, single source of data considerations, and our first AI projects already back then. Because
2019?
So because we had already back then a very successful course on the elements of AI, then the more advanced classes. And nowadays, I'm also quite relieved that we can use GenAI to proofread and make our text in Finnish much more concise.
Yeah, now I use it quite a lot. It's fantastic and very helpful. But as an educator, I actually had in a teacher training event the son of a principal present, and he was a lawyer. And he asked me, I don't know if I had the right answer, but I had an intuitive answer. And the question was, so now with AI being able to do everything, why am I needed as a lawyer if the AI can write all the contracts and whatever? And my intuitive reply was, but of course you have to be able to evaluate what the AI does for you. And I couldn't, for example, evaluate a sophisticated legal contract because I have no legal experience on that level. Only a lawyer could, or a legal expert could. So still you need to have a human being with experience and wisdom to be able to evaluate what the technology does for you as a service, as an assistant. And I think people confuse what AI is a lot, thinking that it somehow replaces us instead of helps us. And of course, sometimes for some very autonomous things, we wouldn't need humans to do them because we can use our brain capacity for other things. What's your take on that? So from your perspective?
I think the biggest challenge with AI is that it cannot take all the perspective. Let's say you think you have a legal case and you write a prompt saying, pretend you're a lawyer, and then you get reply. The thing is that you need to critically think, is it actually only a legal problem or is it going to have other implications? So many regulations currently have both, let's say, law perspective, but also ethical, soft law, data quality perspectives. And it's impossible to write a perfect prompt to get a perfect answer because it will be still limited. So we need a person to actually, let's say, define a problem. And that problem cannot be defined by AI. And writing and asking good questions. It's
And
something
modify
that,
the question if the
yeah,
answer is not perfect.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, and then to politics. So,
Yeah.
when did you become interested in politics? You're very actively helping in the politics, but you're not actively running yourself as a political candidate, which I think you could also do. So, what's your interest in politics here in Finland? And if you can take us to why and how you chose the Swedish People's Party as a political party where you feel affiliated with.
Yeah, very good question. And I think I was never, like, let's say, passionate about politics, but I feel that this is a way how you can have an impact. You can have an impact by voting, but then you really might feel, for me, it's a bit of like fear of missing out in a way. And then you want to affect not only once per election, but a bit more regular basis. And also, when I was still studying law school, I felt that so much legislation is affected by policies that in order to be a good lawyer and be able to think strategically, you need to understand and recognize all kind of trends we have. So I did different things at my studies that made me interested and brought me up to meeting people that I still communicate with nowadays. So Finnish model in United Nations that I did first time when I was 19, debating society and different debating tournaments. And then I really like Swedish language. So that was one of the reasons. Another reason was that also thinking a bit more, let's say, centrist perspective. I don't want to be like to right or to left. I want to be flexible. And I felt that SFP is very flexible and adaptive to different situations, being quite a small party.
Yeah, fantastic. So, is there anything specific you help with or want to promote, although you're not actively as a candidate promoting it, maybe directly to the public, but maybe from behind the scenes, things that you're specifically interested in? Of course, I know you're specifically interested in integration, multicultural things. You can talk about that as an example also, but something else in specific that you are, if not passionate about, but that you want to influence from within somehow.
Yeah. I think it's about digital government and about service-minded approach in providing public services. I'm looking through the quite many election campaigns at the moment, but I really don't feel that the question of efficiently functioning municipality and government services are being brought up. Even though, like, let's say the example of Estonia, there's so many applications that can,
Which you're thinking about.
kind of serve different live events, especially very stressful events like divorce or disease of close family member. There has been lots of development in Finland going on, but still maybe not as actively addressed or lobbied for as it could be.
But is it being addressed now, or would it require someone with your insights to go and, let's say, speak about this more vocally as a candidate or whatever role you feel is suitable for you?
Very good question. I think it's something that needs to be just brought up in different topics, like panel discussions, different events being organized. Because let's say that we are thinking how to improve access to health, but it's not only about being able to make an appointment, but also how you do that. Do you need to leave this callback note and be stressed that you would miss a phone call? Or can you just leave a text message and use AI for it to be automatically concised or translated in other languages? It's a bit about like service path.
So I have to ask you then, this is a very interesting topic that I want to learn more about. So the EU regulation on AI, what do you know about it and what do you think is good, what is bad? If I start with that general question first, and then of course it affects Finland. But on an EU level, compared to, let's say, the global landscape of the US, China being two big superpowers, also maybe running over the EU regulations, affecting our children's use of digital devices more than anyone seems to understand.
Yeah, I think the main trend I want to highlight is uncertainty around different ways how AI regulations and rules will evolve. Because same as with sustainability reporting requirements, we can see lots of puzzles moving back and forward. And I really feel like whatever I say now might change completely in a couple of months. And this legal uncertainty brings us also to a question of how efficiently businesses can predict and work on their long-term strategies on using AI. But of course, there will be certain considerations always remaining. For example, responsible use of AI, and then also data privacy concerns.
Yeah, so can you give some examples of things that you think we should do more of in Finland that is done somewhere else? For example, in Estonia with digital governance, but regarding AI specifically, and maybe related to education and integration of international citizens in Finland. But any of these topics that I know we share a common interest in, but also your own interests.
I think it's about bringing forward the topics of a very efficient collaboration, for example, through hackathons and so-called regulatory sandboxes, where you try to develop a certain proof of concept of a certain new digital service, and then you iterate and test it through different types of events like hackathons, short projects. And I know that, for example, Nordic Smart Government and Business Network, bringing together Nordic countries, have worked on building AI regulatory sandboxes and really seeing how technologies can improve. So it's a kind of try early, fail early, and then develop very early approach, and being very agile about it and bringing universities, businesses, and authority representatives together.
Yeah, fantastic. It's like very entrepreneurial mindset to it. And what regulations do we have in Finland that kind of are blocking more of this that we could maybe try to work on to fix, update? And what doors could, let's say, politicians open for this entrepreneurial spirit to flourish a little bit more?
Maybe I'm taking a bit more like outsider perspective, because I want to highlight that I haven't worked as an insider with these topics, but I feel it's also about being aware of different types of funding, EU funding opportunities, and actively applying for them, so that you have all these financial platform to work on developed projects. And for example, Estonia has been very efficient in looking for different types of financing instruments like technical support instrument, and then kicking off projects and collaborating with other countries.
So then this question with public funding versus private funding, what's your take on that? So when you talk about EU funding also and public funding in general, we have Business Finland, etc. I hear a lot of talks and limiting talks about the funding not being enough. And then also when you use taxpayer money, maybe it's difficult also to justify a lot of investments, but then also you might be limiting things and developments, innovations that should maybe not be dependent on public funding being available or not. So some things maybe should be more encouraged to be developed in the private sector. What's your take on this private-public sector funding, I would say, dichotomy? more collaboration, or more division, or how do you see that?
I think it's important to remain very flexible and at the same time being very clear about the business case when you apply for the funding, because also it might take a very long time to get the funding approved. So it's good to have this clear-cut case, understand that different circumstances change quite fast, and then based on that, once this funding is received, it can be used very efficiently. So I think it's not just a question about how you balance different funding sources, but what you're going to use it for, how you prepare a very good and clear funding application.
And I mean, I follow a lot of top entrepreneurs in Finland, and there's one, let's say, proposal of trying to invite, let's say, more investors from abroad who might be more direct sources of funding to a lot of entrepreneurs, so that instead of, let's say, applying for public funding, you would be able to attract, let's say, more international capital for Finnish companies that I see and I hear and read and experience that we are falling behind a lot of international entrepreneurial ecosystems regarding access to capital. Whereas we have fantastic entrepreneurs, fantastic innovations, and fantastic universities, fantastic research, but access to funding, and maybe we have a too good of a bureaucracy to change, and then at the same time where we still have the message. I mean, as a citizen, we hear that we don't have funding, we don't have let's say resources for all these kind of activities, whereas there's more private money than ever. And also in Finland, there's more private money than ever. Yeah. And in the world also, there's a lot of money that could be attracted to Finland, to Finnish initiatives that maybe should not be part of the public system, because then you have a lot of extra doors to be open. So let's say EU funding. So there's a bureaucracy in EU that we don't really can affect from Finland, from the Finnish political, let's say, ministries as much as we would maybe like to. So the Nordics, we might have more in common with each other in the Nordics than compared to the center European countries. So yeah, I don't think we should refer always to the EU standards and policies, although Europe is a fantastic, let's say, hub of collaboration. We have a lot of things that we can collaborate on. But then when we have the bottlenecks getting stuck in the center of Europe, I don't think that helps innovation. And we will not be on a global leadership level much longer in any of the fields where we have been recently, if we don't try to innovate also in the government, in politics, and making sure that we have the best players, let's say, leading the way. Be it from the private sector or the public sector, but we should have some kind of better collaboration. And I don't know, from your perspective, outside or inside, how you see this being improved, and what countries maybe that are already leading the way regarding these kind of things.
I think Sweden is quite a good example when we take Nordic Smart Government and Business Network, because they really have lots of events or ongoing conferences and workshops that they take together with different stakeholders. I have been to some of the events earlier, and I like that they have very lightweight approach to it. You don't need to have 1 week conference. You can have just one day with a couple of presentations, with a workshop, with the guest speakers representing business and talking about the trends, and then you can reiterate and move forward. Because I sometimes feel that there is an expectation that if you want to develop something, you need to first set up like a perfect case. You need to have a conference, you need to get lots of approvals, but it's very important to be flexible.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting, and I'm trying to also look at Sweden for some things that I might miss from my first home country, but then also trying to take the best case practices from Finland to teach also in Sweden. So I think the collaboration between Finland and Sweden is a very natural one, and we should be collaborating more with our neighbors and with all countries that are, let's say, similar in values and so on. So, and then for you on a personal level, so what are your, let's say, next steps now in the campaign? What are things that you try to do on a concrete level? Let's say personally, I know you're supporting one candidate in specific, and what are other steps that you're doing personally on a concrete level now during this election period?
I think the most important is to raise awareness that you can vote, and that might sound very obvious, but then you look at the election schedules, you look at April, and definitely people have Easter holidays, they have travels booked, they forget that they can vote in advance, or they forget about the opening hours of their voting point, and then, oops, you can just forget to vote. And that's like such a big omission in a way. And then for also raising the awareness of the experts who came to Finland, when you're eligible to vote, why should you vote, and how you can get information about voting in different languages. That's super important, because once you have information, you can get also more motivation to learn about this, and also get understanding that having an international background might not prevent you from running as a candidate even in a certain levels of elections.
So let's go into this. So first, the obvious question, why should you vote as an international citizen here in Finland? Why should you vote as an international person? Maybe you can direct yourself directly to the camera. Why should you vote in the elections?
I think because you live there, and living there means that there might be different situations coming up. There might be life changes, and you never know what you might need. So even if you feel like everything is going perfect, you still need to have the way to impact. And then by voting, you can impact the future of healthcare system in a place where you live, the approach to how environment is going to be protected, the cases of how family members can receive support from the municipality. That's all the questions that are important to address, and just having your say. And then it's also a bit about like peer pressure. If you tell in your network that you vote, or maybe that you help with election campaigns, that might raise the interest for others as well.
And then finally, you having been a very proactive citizen here in Finland, from being, let's say, surviving yourself, changing cities yourself, studying and learning languages yourself, and then getting into politics, and also being as a consultant on very complex issues regarding technology and legal matters. So you have really been very proactive, and I think the role of the citizen also something that people underplay. They don't think that they have the capacity to do anything. So to vote is one thing, but then the other thing, what would be your words of encouragement of what an international person can do here in Finland if they take a more proactive, let's say, attitude to it, and what are the steps maybe required to understand that you can actually do things to create your own situation, your own future?
I think the common misconception might be that it's either this or that. You either vote or you then run for elections. You have to be a city council member and then spend 20 hours on local politics per each week. But then there's so many ways you can impact your future just by looking into different legislative initiatives and voting for them to be advanced for further considerations. allocating just a couple of hours per week to support your candidate in the election campaign based again on your availability. Or for example, joining certain committee work inside the party. That's something that happens online, and we usually also choose the times that are mostly suitable for us, taking into account your life circumstances. And then in quite many political parties work nowadays, you can also work and collaborate with other members in English, not just in Finnish or Swedish. And of course, with the further development of all technologies, it makes it more easier to just translate the information you need and move forward. So the key takeaway is that you don't need to be fully committed. Your participation in the local politics can be flexible, and this is something that you can always adjust to your life situation, especially in Finland when we have quite, I would say, flexible and understanding collaborative environment.
Yes, definitely. Fantastic. So any final words, any final recommendations, any final tips or things you would like to say to the audience before we finish?
I think it's just something you don't need to have a burning passion for to be an effective or very engaged citizen. You can start from things you're really interested in just because of your current life situation, and just dig in the question, look for information, and check how you can have an impact in your municipality.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alexandra. I look forward to continuing talking to you also off the cameras. And
Thank you,
I wish
Joni.
you a fantastic campaigning period with your involvement in so many different committees and projects. And I look forward to talking to you soon again.
Thank you for great discussion.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.